What have you learned from your customers?
Oh, well, I can't say that on a public podcast.
So what have been the biggest learnings for you about building Thirdside? Don't worry, we won't tell anybody.
I could tell you, but then I'd have to kill you.
That's right. We get told that all the time. So
for us, we get very positive feedback about the people that they're engaging with on Thirdside. The persistence, the professionalism, the follow-up, the no pressure, that's all been very positive. Where we've lost is when we tried to go after things that were too big for our britches at the time. We're small boutique by design. As you know, there's a million companies out there. Everybody and their dog seems to be doing win-loss at the moment. So we know our differentiation, and we also know where we don't play. If a company needs 100 interviews done a month to populate a dashboard by a certain company, we're not that. We're more of your joint problem solver. We're going to go deep. We're going to go with you. We're going to live that journey with you and your customers. We're going to provide answers to questions and problems that our customers solve, more so than trying to power through a bunch of interviews to populate a pie chart. And that's when we win.
Welcome to the Founders Journey podcast. Inspiration, education for founders by founders. Welcome back to the Founders Journey podcast. Glad to be back for another episode. Peter and I are here with Ron Carson today. Guy I've known for a while and is the founder and CEO of a company called Thirdside. So today we're gonna not only talk about Ron's actual journey as a founder of building Thirdside, but also what Thirdside does is provide kind of third-party analytics around win-loss reviews, things like that. So we're going to really get into kind of understanding the voice of the customer and messaging and things like that. So Ron, awesome to have you.
Thanks, Greg. Thanks for having me, guys.
Why do companies make getting information from their customers, like getting good data from their customers, so hard?
It's hard. It is hard. If you've built something, it's your idea, it's your baby. I've been there. It's hard to emotionally cross that threshold to hear really bad news and all these blood, sweat, and tears you've got in there. Sometimes it's easier to not hear that you might be a little off base. But that leads to problems further on down the road. You've got to just kind of face into it and just ask. If you can do it in a disarming way, so the prospective customer, future customer, former customer doesn't feel the pressure like you're about to spring yeah, but what if we did? Don't do that. But just listen, actively listen, and encourage them to provide hard answers for you. And it's pure gold, but it's hard. Thirdside is a boutique marketing agency, and we specialize in just asking. Win-loss research for why did they buy, why didn't they buy, what could be done differently next time, but also throughout the customer journey, customer experience. So what's going well through that SaaS journey, the revenue architecture, revenue by design kind of approach. And also on the other end, when things aren't corrected throughout the journey, the churn research. So it's all about just asking throughout for us. And it's just a phenomenal amount of gold feedback that we're able to provide customers along the way.
It is. I think it's always like that, right? When we talk about like getting feedback from customers, I mean, no founder has ever wanted to hear how what they're doing is, really off base and there's all kinds of problems with it and everything like that. But if you're not getting that kind of information at any stage, whether you're early stage startup, you're a much larger, more mature company, if you're not getting it, you're completely just flying absolutely blind. And you end up seeing the result of it, which is, companies just start making it up and making up problems that don't actually exist and making up solutions that don't actually exist.
I was on the other side of the conversation when you did you brought the data, because I worked on the digital side for execution for Outmatch and Checked for a very long time. And so getting the data is it was amazing. In the beginning, AD used to do it, and then you guys did it. And then it was just, we got all this information that was super helpful with all kinds of things. But what happens is everyone just, they don't ask. And then we sit in the room, like Greg said, and we come up with, there's just all these opinions. And our rule at Render Tribe is don't fall in love with your ideas, fall in love with your results, which is I don't care what the idea is, go find out what works. And your point is just find out what the reason, the actual reason.
Yeah. You keep using the phrase they don't ask. And in my sales pitch deck, it's just ask. What if you could just ask? I mean, that's the whole shtick for Thirdside right now.
Right.
Sometimes it's hard to do it, but that's where the answers are.
Absolutely.
Yeah. That's a good, I'm going to ask the question of both of you because I was the beneficiary of a lot of this data many times. And on the marketing and go-to-market side, but it's not just that, it's like product and other things. Like it is an emotional thing to be afraid what people are going to say. Like I know, Greg, you did it early to get that feedback. Like, what is that like for a founder? Like, what are they going through? It's probably scary, right? It's scary to know why we didn't get a deal. But if you don't know, it's worse than the knowing, right? It's way worse than knowing.
Peter, to answer your question, right? Like what we did with Ron. So as we were building the predecessor company check.com and then Outmatch, we had this process basically, and we did a lot more than this over the years, but we had this process essentially set up where every time a company went into either a closed won or closed loss status, we triggered it out to Ron and his team, and they did a third party interview with that customer, right? To try to find out, why did you buy, right? What was it? Who else were you looking at? Why did you select Outmatch over these other competitors? What were your major concerns? What were your major problems? Things like that. Same thing with a loss. Who did you select? Why did you select them? Where did Outmatch miss? And it's really funny. Every time we did it, I don't even know at the peak, Ron, how many we were doing, but there were a lot of reports, right? And you talk about the fear of getting good information. Like when I say good, I mean quality information, because they were not always good, right? And
real information.
Right. And we would share it with our entire executive team. But every time we got those emails, you sort of you're like this, when you open up that email and you look at that report, and these reports were extremely candid and lengthy and gave you a lot of data, and you would say like, oh man, right? And because you couldn't hide from it. And some were super positive and you love to read them. Others you wanted to crawl under your desk. But the power in that information, and then what that did, you could take that information and turn it over. Then, like Peter, at the time, you guys were our marketing agency, and we'd send that information to you and iterate our messaging and our sales process. And it became a very, very tight iterative process because the faster we were learning incredibly fast what customers thought. And we could take that data, feed it right back into the process. So in real time, you're making changes based on that. But you're right. I mean, that word scary, Ron, is like, it is. And, and I think it is hard to, I love that tagline of just ask, but it is hard to just ask sometimes, especially when it's not going to be a good answer.
To your credit and the credit of the people at Outmatch, you guys had the right mentality for receiving the feedback, right? It wasn't oh my gosh, customer success did something bad, or oh, the sales rep isn't any good, or your marketing stinks. It was, oh, we can do something with this constructive feedback. Not every company has that. When we're working with some companies, there are distinctly some functions in the organizations that are a little standoffish. They shouldn't be. Nobody's being thrown under the bus with this. Feedback is a gift. I know fruitcake is too, but this is a good gift. And you can do good things with it. And if you don't just ask and you don't take the feedback, you get a bunch of bad symptoms later on. I used to try to write these things down with the aspirations of writing a book someday, but look at a bloated pipeline. The pipeline grows and grows and grows, and it's looking better, but everybody's in the no decision category, or they're ghosted, or they're not responding, right? And then the self-talk internally in the company says, oh, they don't get it, or we don't know why they're not responding. Mm-hmm. Well, there's a reason. And if you just ask, you'll find out that your value proposition is off, or they probably shouldn't have been in the funnel in the first place because they're about as well qualified as a business card at a trade show, right? All these things get brought to the surface by going through this process. So it just continues to enhance and improve the operations in the revenue cycle.
Yeah. Yeah. So, Peter, you've got to see this all the time. Like, I mean, you're living in this world, right? Where you're at the top of the funnel, you got to see that kind of thing all the time.
This is why my next question is coming. So I knew Greg pretty well when we worked together. We were good friends. And so that made it easier for us to work together. And he had a very open approach to building the business, right? To your point. What is it like when they don't? Like when it's like a witch hunt? Like how do you get a company out of that mindset? I know that's not your job, but you probably run into it where and I see it all the time. They have this internal kind of narrative that isn't very healthy. Like Greg and I worked on a project recently that was going on, and it's like how do you use that data to kind of tell the story to kind of break them out of it? Do you do that? Do you ever have to do that?
Yeah. When we're doing it as a practice, we try to bring those stakeholders to the table and let us deliver the bad news and let us take the arrows.
Yeah.
So that our champions internally aren't the ones taking forward the potentially controversial information.
Right.
The thing we try to avoid is having the news being squashed by the loudest, most senior voice around the table if they don't want to hear it.
Right.
You know, the personality types. So we always try to.
We've met them once in a while.
Yeah.
They come up.
I've never done that before.
When we're presenting, we try to make sure, you know, feedback is a gift. I said it jokingly before. It comes up and it's true. But we always try to show out of a cohort of interviews, here's how many times this issue came up.
Right.
Here's who said it. Here's exactly what they said. And here's the revenue impact.
Yeah.
And so we try to stitch all that together so that the naysayers, the disbelievers, we present it to them and provide the information in a way that they can kind of double click on that and drill down and go, oh, I see that account. I'm familiar with that account. I get it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so it sounds like you're delivering what you just said to me. It wasn't emotional how you delivered it to us, just in that what you said. The fact-driven thing, does that take emotion out of it? Or does that help take emotion out of it? That it's like, here are some facts for you, right?
It's hard to refute it when you're delivering, these are the people and here's exactly what they said. Oh, here's their phone number if you'd like to double check.
Right.
Yeah.
As opposed to sitting around a boardroom table and, well, I think this, well, I think this other thing, and I don't believe you, and that's not what I hear. Right. When you have 20, 30 interviews done and you can pick out 3 or 4 common themes that are impacting revenue, the team can kind of get behind fixing that.
Yeah.
The theme part of that, Ron, is really the important part, because I've been in those board meetings, right? And we've actually had you present at board meetings before. And, you know, it's very easy for that board dynamic, but it's not only inside a board, it's even inside a leadership team and stuff like that, right? Where it's like, it's this, I forgot what the bias is called. You guys will probably know, but it's like a recency bias, right? Like all of a sudden I hear, you know, we were working on this deal and they said you didn't have this functionality, and the sales person is screaming about it. Now the sales leader is screaming about it. Now everybody in product is screaming about it. And it's like, was it a one-off thing, or is this something we're hearing over and over again, and being able to quickly dissect those things to break that kind of emotional conversation of, we lost the deal because of this, now we got to go build it, and we suck, and this sucks, and the products, and you see that stuff, it just starts to cycle all the time, right?
Yeah.
Where you can just shut it down. And I remember some of the, you know, I think you may have presented even more than once at our board meetings, and you know, being able to come in there, and I know you did this for different M&A transactions, like when we were acquiring a bunch of businesses, and to be able to come in and say, look, we heard this one thing over here. It's probably not that important. It was just this one time we heard it, but these 3 things, we're hearing these all the time. Like this is coming up over and over and over again. And being able to then feed that very quickly back into the product roadmap was really like, it provided that kind of data provides clarity for leadership, for boards, you know, things like that. So, I mean, it goes well beyond even the marketing and sales impact of it.
One of the themes I remember that really stuck with me when we were doing that work with you, Greg, was actually on the core win-loss, not the M&A stuff, but you had one particular sales rep on your team who was always known as doing excellent discovery, on the ball, just like class act all the way. And then once or twice out of, 30 interviews over the years, it came up that they maybe weren't being responsive. So it's important to understand the trend. I mean, everybody has an off day. So in that way, it was more like a 360-degree review of the rep. Like, here's one instance where maybe you could have followed up a bit more. So that trend's really important.
Sales and marketing is, it's like triumphs and defeats. It's like an emotional thing. And it's so hard for people to work in that and with level heads, right? And so you talked about this, like follow up with people around the reps, and they have to be nervous about it, right? Go-to-market people are nervous. We're all kind of nervous about it. How do you dissuade that? Because sometimes that message you're not delivering, it kind of comes second to us. Because I'd never met you, but we worked together for a number of years indirectly. Yeah.
I think so in marketing, my experience has been that most marketing departments are hungry for more information about the market and for customers. For different reasons, marketing in particular gets distanced from customers. And I was trying to advocate marketing should be having these conversations all the time. Win, loss, or no, just have conversations to be dialed in. So I think in marketing's case, they're always hungry and open to hearing more. How can we improve messaging, positioning, thoughts on demand gen, thoughts on thought leadership? And that can all be extracted from these conversations as well. Sales tends to be a little more standoffish, I think, generally, because if it's win-loss, we are kind of looking at what they did. But I think if they go at it with eyes wide open, and this is a chance to really help train and tailor and enhance almost like personal feedback for every single one of the reps, it can actually have a very dramatically positive effect. Because sales management can't control necessarily what the reps are putting in for win-loss in the CRM, but I can tell you about 75% of it's wrong.
Right.
And you can't make decisions based on data that's 75% wrong.
I mean, is that, I just want to drill on that for a second, because that's super interesting, right? Like, is that where you find that, I don't know if that's a scientific thing or anecdotal, but that often, the information in the CRM on this is why we lost the deal, it's wrong that often?
It's either that wrong or it's so vague you can't act on it.
Right.
We did one project for a company. They were preparing to be acquired, and they wanted us to get ahead and kind of do the customer due diligence, or on the win-loss side of it in particular. Yeah. They gave us the list of, I think, 20 accounts to go after. 18 of them lost to one competitor, and most of those, the reason was price.
Right.
When we did the research, they only lost to that competitor once, and never on price. The reps are not going to put in there, oh, I didn't do a good enough job in discovery. Oh, I didn't align their needs in the demo. Oh, I didn't follow up sufficiently. So it's just not, you're not going to get good answers out of it. I don't care how many sub menus you stick into your CRM. In there, down and select the answer. You're not going to self-select, that one's on me, I screwed up.
Yeah.
You don't do that.
You not only provide this service, this is your business. So Thirdside is a company you founded. And number one, how'd you get into this? What made you say hey, this is the problem space that I've really identified that I got to go solve? Because I just think it's a really important one.
Oh, Greg, I'm glad you asked. I got into this specifically because I was a marketing person that got to go carry a sales quota for a while.
Yeah.
And so I got to see both sides of it. So I got to be in marketing in a big company and realize, we don't really know how to message to our customers. How do we fix this? That got left behind. A few years later, marketing in a small company, still not really sure we had it right. You leave, and this was a small enough company, you had to fill and close your own sales funnel. So a lot of cold calling, a lot of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And it occurred to me, we still were not hitting it. So I got permission from the CEO at the time to do half of my time in marketing/market research. And so I laid it on really thick on my prospecting for research emails that I don't want to sell you anything. I think our messaging is off. I just want to talk to you.
Yeah.
So I was able to actually go and just ask a bunch of people.
Mm-hmm.
And that was in IP management, intellectual property management. And so we had a belief before this research that it was all about monetizing and strategy. It was in the era of patent trolls, right, when they were very fashionable and getting all the headlines. So that was kind of the vector the company was on based on the vision. Mm-hmm. What we learned by interviewing all the chief IP counsels that I spoke to is that it's cost containment and risk aversion. That's it.
Right.
Change the messaging, and we're in the final two with many companies in the Fortune 500.
I'm curious, Ron. So in building Thirdside, do you do your own win-loss reviews on your deals?
Nope.
I was so hoping you'd say yes, and this is what we learned.
We do them. We do them. I don't do them.
You don't do them for yourself. I got it. You're but you do them as your business. Like for Thirdside,
Yes.
Like, so
Absolutely.
if Thirdside, if you are bidding on win-loss review work and data intelligence work, is that, will you, if you lose that deal to a competitor, will you go out and do a win-loss
Mhm.
review on yourself?
We have the way we're set up. There's I guess firewalls between various people.
Yeah.
So I'll bring someone in who can go in not affiliated with Thirdside, not affiliated with the sales cycle in any way. So we get the neutral third party, same thing we preach,
Yep.
to go in and ask.
So what have been the biggest learnings for you about building Thirdside? Like, what have you learned from your customers?
Well, I can't say that on a public podcast.
Everyone comes in here just tells us everything. I'm just telling you.
For us, we get very positive feedback about the people that they're engaging with on Thirdside. The persistence, the professionalism, the follow-up, the no pressure, that's all been very positive. Where we've lost is when we tried to go after things that were too big for our britches at the time.
Yeah.
We're small boutique by design. As you know, there's a million companies out there. Everybody and their dog seems to be doing win-loss at the moment. So we know our differentiation, and we also know where we don't play. If a company needs 100 interviews done a month to populate a dashboard by a certain company, we're not that. We're more of your joint problem solver. We're going to go deep. We're going to go with you. We're going to live that journey with you and your customers. We're going to provide answers to questions and problems that our customers solve, more so than trying to power through a bunch of interviews to populate a pie chart.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So
and that's when.
So you've been building this now for how long? Have you been in the business?
10 years, 15.
Yeah. So I mean, talk about the journey a little bit. I mean, what's been the kind of the biggest challenges along the way that you've had to kind of deal with in building the business?
Imposter syndrome as an entrepreneur.
We've never heard that before.
But it's a necessary evil. And, as you put yourself out there more, the more you realize, I do good work, and, people engage. I think it's different growing a service agency than a software company. Mm-hmm. I think the playbook to get people to sign up for software is, I don't want to say this disparagingly. I think it's easier. I think it's more straightforward. Mm-hmm. I think doing the consulting thing, especially small, starting out when it's kind of you and a close network of people, it's a little more personal. I find it was tough early on. Needed a few happy customers like Outmatch in the early days to go, yeah, you guys did good. And then it gives you the swagger and the confidence to go into the next one. I think it's probably the same as any other founder, putting yourself out there and getting going.
Peter, you see the same thing. I mean, you're in the service. You're kind of in the service side.
I mean,
the difference in terms of trying to get to scale, or when you're
we've been doing it for 15 years, and it's true. You need to get some wins and get some swagger, and then some street cred, and the street cred builds over time. If you have a product, you can sell a product. It functions, it works, it doesn't break. But when you deliver services, it's people working with people. It may not be our people that are the problem with that relationship that creates the problem that now you have, because you may lose a customer over it. So those are things I see more on the service side than I do with the actual product, because we do all of our marketing for product companies, but we're a service company marketing for ourselves, and that's kind of what I've learned.
It's more personal.
Yes, it is definitely more personal.
In the early days, rejection stings more.
Yeah.
What have been the biggest learnings for you, Ron, since you've started this?
As an entrepreneur, or in the area of win-loss?
Yeah, no, as an entrepreneur.
Resilience, persistence, just keep going. I mean, if the passion's there, is that the thing that excites you when you get up in the morning to keep going? Absolutely, it is in this case. Mm-hmm. I'm going to come back to win-loss.
Yeah.
It hurts a little bit when you don't win, right? It's like, oh my gosh, what happened? Mm-hmm. It's like, the early days of your most awkward dating experiences. Where didn't she like
humbling.
Me? It's humbling. Yeah, it's horrible. But if you do the win-loss, it's like the equivalent of having your friend go ask Sally if she likes me. You get that feedback. Oh no, he's a really nice guy. I just want to be friends. it's you get the win-loss, you get that affirmation that, hey, you might not have been the right choice for that particular account, but they really valued certain aspects of your approach.
Yep.
To me, when, in the early days when, we're trying to pay the mortgage, feed the kids, and really try to get it off the ground, those are some of the things that really helped us keep going, I think.
It's a funny thing, right? Because you're in that business of doing win-loss reviews and collecting data and things like that. But I think for any founder, those early days, whether you're doing what you're doing or your software company or anything, that rejection, because there's so much more rejection, right, than there is wins, especially early on. I mean, look,
Yes.
even any sales cycle, like even a good, solid, healthy sales cycle, you're losing 75% of the time, right? And but especially in the early days, I remember back in the early days of Checked. I mean, Peter, you probably remember this. I remember you and I sitting there looking at the data way back and saying, like, our win rate's like 4%. Right? And I mean, it was really bad. So so all we were doing was getting rejected. Like, that was it. Every day you showed up for work and you just got rejected. Right.
And like the pivotal moment that I think was Checked was they didn't get a deal, and you can mention or not mention the customer, but then they went with someone else, right? This other company. And then like a month or two later, this other company couldn't get it launched. It just failure. And then they came back. And then they were customers, I think, the entire time that I was there with both entities. Like, as the entities grew, they stayed forever. And I was like, you lost it, but then you got it back. Like, it was like, whoa.
Is that Disney you're talking about, Peter?
Yeah.
Yeah. And, well, yes.
It did close, and it was like lost. And then all of a sudden, it was like, wait, Disney closed. Like, what?
Yeah, but you're giving us way more credit than we did. If you recall, there was another part of that story, which was our major competitor who we ultimately acquired. The name of that company was Checkster, and we were Checked, right? And there was a part of that story where Disney got confused.
They thought they got one and not the other.
So we ended up benefiting by the fact that we lost it, but then they got confused between the company names, and it came back. So I think we probably got a little bit more credit than we deserved on that one.
And so I'll ask you, because those are the moments. That was like the time that Greg's like, we got to find this out, and started doing this. And so a really small company with, stretching their dollars, how do you, like, what would your advice be? How do you do it on your own first? You definitely do it, right? You're saying you always have to do this. You do it on your own first. How do you do it on your own? Because you kind of mentioned that you do it for yourselves. Yeah. How to best do that. And then, what's your advice to companies, like how they should do this?
So definitely do it. A couple of things I wouldn't do. Don't turn this over to the summer intern.
Yep.
Don't turn it over to your most junior person on staff.
Mm-hmm.
Your sales reps probably can't do it.
No.
Your best bet in a small company is probably product management or founder, someone who has an eye towards the strategy and direction of the company, mm-hmm. And can ask business level questions, not systematically go through and ask the questions and fill in a field on a spreadsheet. Mm. Then in doing so, there's a few extra little tips to make sure. Under no circumstances are you to go, oh, could we re-talk about that and try to open up the sales process? Don't do that, or the conversation's over.
Yeah.
And the other thing I do,
right?
Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm. The thing I do, and this I think just comes to me naturally. Canadian by birth, I tend to apologize a lot. So I tend to say things like, hey, I'm sorry, this is going to sound like I'm probing for a sales pitch, but I promise I'm not. I say that so much in an interview on purpose that they go, I got it, stop. Just go ahead and ask your question.
Yeah.
Lay that on super thick so that they really finally kind of internalize that it is a safe space, if I can use that word, mm-hmm. and they can speak freely without fear of you booby-trapping them into another sales pitch. Those would be my tips. Don't turn it over to the junior person, and create a safe environment for them to provide answers you don't want to hear.
And from what you said before, keep it someone that's not part of any of that, like someone that has maybe a different view. You said internally you
Well,
firewall
strategic view,
someone.
right? I mean, I think it's making sure
firewall.
that whoever going to have, right. It's like it's the strategic view of it.
So it's not like the VP of sales. That's not a good idea, right? It would
No,
be
I would
someone else.
keep sales out of it. I mean, if you take a salesperson, whatever seniority or experience level they've got, their mindset is
Close a deal.
prospect,
Right.
find opportunity and go for the close.
Yeah.
Totally the wrong mindset.
Yeah.
The junior people are going
to know what to say.
Yeah, and I've seen it go through. It gets mechanical, right? When your win-loss program is documented in a spreadsheet, that isn't good because the answers are too short. You got to be able to have the conversations and pull on the threads. And if they bring up something you weren't expecting, feel free to pull on it. But you got to have enough knowledge of, I guess, the strategy of the business, the direction you're going, the problem you're trying to solve for your company to have a good conversation with them. And in a small company, it'll depend more on the personality, the persona of the person, more so than I think the title in many cases.
Mm-hmm. So I've seen companies try to do this by surveys, right? And, not only in our portfolio, but in other, I've seen them we're just going to send out everybody a form survey, right? And I think I know where you're going to go with this, but what's the problem with that approach?
You're never going to get a good sample out of that. Often you'll get people that are polarized on either end of the spectrum, like really grumpy, really negative, or really positive, sunshine and roses. It's hard to get a good sense of what's really going on.
Yep.
You can't ask enough questions or put enough structure or thought into the survey to be prepared for every little nuance that's going to come out of what they're really thinking. You can't capture it all in a survey. The survey will tend to grow because you're going to try to capture all that, and then they're not going to complete it.
Right.
The other thing I will point out is that we've done the interviews on the other end of Net Promoter Score, for example.
Right.
Mm-hmm. When people are presented with surveys beyond just the 1 through 10 but the follow-up questions, if it's one of those things that pops up in an email or in the application, they just want it off their screen. They are not putting a lot of thought into those answers.
Yeah.
We've interviewed people that gave our clients a 10. In reality, they didn't remember doing the survey and were really angry.
Right.
So it's just bad data, quite simply.
So what's your thought on NPS just in general, like Net Promoter Scores just in general? I mean, is there value, or is it just kind of this trying to make something that is decidedly not scalable and doesn't need to be scalable?
I used to think of a lot more of it. So I'm going to jump on my soapbox for a second here. I find it so ironic that the entire software world and just high-tech business, we're investing so much into so many different tools and mechanisms and ways to understand what the customers are really thinking. Net Promoter Score, CSAT, customer, effort score, and all these different touch points. Every time they touch your company, some little survey pops up. What if you could just ask, hey, how are we doing?
Right.
You can get so much more information. And when we did the Net Promoter Score follow-up, I don't have the stat in front of me, but there was enough going on in the survey. More often than not, they didn't remember doing the survey, or you're catching them at a moment in time where they may be happy, they may be super frustrated, but you're skewing your results immediately, and there's no context. You're not getting nearly enough. The valuable insights came from the follow-on conversations. Let's go talk to all of the detractors. Let's go talk to all of the proponents. For that matter, go talk to the ones in the middle too, because chances are they're on one of the two spectrums as well.
Right.
And just didn't answer the question.
Yeah.
Honestly.
What do you think about a company incenting someone to even just talk to you, but to take part, like giving them a gift?
We used to be very anti-incentive.
Yeah.
Because more often than not, you'd get people in it for the incentive than the feedback.
Yeah.
Things have changed post-COVID. It's way harder to get people's attention these days. So we've kind of shifted in the other direction where we'll do more on the incentive side to get those conversations. Not everybody can accept them, but sometimes it's enough to get their attention.
Is there information though, Ron? Like one of the things that always amazed me with working with you guys, and we're working with you in another company right now to continue to, is the actual completion rates are really, really high. Like, I mean, we give you 10, 20 people to contact. We're going to get 17, 18 reports.
Yeah.
Like, Why? Like, what is it that
it
is
timing?
getting
Like,
somebody? Because we're not doing incentives, we're not doing anything, right? Like, what is it that motivates somebody to provide that information?
I could tell you, but then I'd have to kill you.
That's right. We get told that all the time. So,
no word of a lie. Our customers have called our ability to get people on the phone and get them to talk our superpower. I don't like it when companies or consultants talk about their superpower.
Yeah.
So we latched down to that one because our customers used it. We are good at it. It's science, or part art, part science.
Yeah.
A really bad conversion rate for us, like a bad quality list with a bunch of disgruntled former customers, is still north of 30%.
right.
With happy customers, we'll get north of 80%.
Yep.
And is timing important with win-loss? Like when we call after, like how close to that deal, or is there like a shelf life where they'll give you information? Like
we'll successfully go back about a year in many cases.
Okay.
We don't try not to go too back. Sorry, go after them too shortly after the close, because it just kind of smells like a recovery attempt.
Yeah.
But a month or two, up to a year is about what we aim for.
Yep. So if you were to lay out, a process, right, and just kind of helping a founder or a head of sales or something kind of think through this, right? What is that incorporation of what you're doing, say, into a normal selling motion? What does that look like if you were to kind of lay out a process for somebody?
I think to keep it, so one of the things that takes the most amount of time while we're working with companies is the sourcing of the list.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you know this, but not everybody's CRM is perfect.
I haven't found one yet that is, or even close.
So to keep it from becoming a burden and a royal pain and just something that gets shoved off to the side, I'd recommend start with a quarterly cadence, assuming like a 3 to 6 month sales cycle. Mm-hmm. Start with a quarterly, get the list, internally or externally, at least get it together. Don't focus on making it perfect. Make sure people have progressed far enough in the sales process to be worth a conversation, right? The business card at a trade show is not far enough.
Right.
And then let them self-select a little bit. People spend an awful lot of time trying to get together the perfect list and go through the CRM and circle around with the sales team and customer success or whoever repeatedly, only to find out that 30% of them bounce anyways because the person is no longer at the company. So err on the side of a larger list. Maybe it's imprecise, and plan on gathering a couple, say 2 contacts minimum per account. Not everyone's going to agree to talk, but there's guaranteed in B2B SaaS, there's going to be more than one person that can tell the story.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So that's the way I would get started. That's the way to keep it manageable. Let them self-select. If they have something worth saying, they'll respond.
And if you do that quarterly process, it's probably a couple months from the deal by the time you get the list, most likely, right?
I think that way seems to work well for a lot of the people we work with. It's not such a burdensome process that they can't do it. It's all right. Quarter's coming up. We can get it together. It's just as much work as doing it every month, but they only have to do it 4 times a year.
Right. What are the biggest issues, Ron, that you run it? Like where do companies get in their own way from getting a process like this in motion?
It really varies. We've had everything from your salespeople are jerks.
Right.
That never goes over well. I can tell you that.
Yeah.
Often what we hear, if I bring this back to kind of the startup community here, or kind of the 0 to 10 million revenue, the way I would characterize what we see happen is they have some success with some initial messaging, very often technology led, like real-time bidirectional synchronization or something.
Right.
Or they fall in love with an ROI message. If you do this, this is the positive return and payback timeframes. That works with a certain subset of your market, but it doesn't work necessarily in the broad market. Mm-hmm. So that's the thing. That's the key finding I believe we see coming in most consistently for the size companies.
Right.
So they'll have some success selling to a technical audience with a technical message, but then as they try to become more strategic and target more of a business audience, the message doesn't change.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And then it doesn't mean anything, right? Real-time buy synchronization doesn't mean anything to a CRO.
Right.
But having up-to-date information from your ERP system in your Salesforce account for your reps that are in the field, so they have accurate information in front of the customer. Oh, yeah, I'm in, right?
Right.
Same solution, same technology, different message makes a huge difference.
Right.
In other cases, we've had people truly focus on the ROI, only to have most of the customers actually care about employee retention and satisfaction. That's a very different message, right? So that seems to me to be the thing that changes so much in this kind of mid-stage, right? We have some success, but we're trying to take off now, and it's making that message appeal to the broader market.
The early adopters are all for the new tech, and then how do you bring this? And then, a company will start to flatline their growth, and then you're basically finding that out, and you probably could see it coming a little bit as they evolve. Yeah. So that's a huge benefit.
Aha moment, like blind spot.
Yeah.
The other things are fairly common, like not enough discovery, didn't align the demo to customer needs, didn't follow up. Those happen, I won't say regularly, commonly, but we come across those fairly frequently.
Yeah. And they're pretty much, I'm sure, happening across the board, right? Every company is going to have an instance or two where the rep just flubbed the deal, right? It happens, and
it happens.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so can I ask a really tough question? Like, what if you don't do this? Like, what do you see? Like, you've obviously not closed every deal, but what happens if you don't do this to a company? Like,
Yeah, well, I jotted down some symptoms we often see. So I alluded to one of them earlier. It's this concept of the bloated pipeline.
Yeah.
Yep.
They're in there for 400 days, and they're just not progressing. They're not moving. They're not closed lost. They're not closed won. They're not no decisions. They're just kind of languishing there, like the forever maybes. That happens a lot. I've seen companies hire and fire multiple sales teams. Oh, they didn't get it. We got this new team. They're going to get it. Well, that happens more than once.
Right.
It might not be the professional salespeople you keep hiring. Another one that pops up is the expanded buying groups, right? So you get in, you find a champion. Oh, let me bring someone else into the conversation. Next conversation. Oh, let me bring someone else, right? You haven't hit the right audience message alignment to drive that value proposition forward.
Right.
One more I'll hit you with. Beware of VP of special projects as your champion. It's awesome. They are enthusiastic. They're charging ahead. They got the title special projects. This is going to be great. They're going to change the company. No, they're in a holding pattern until retirement.
It's like a head of strategy, right?
I've seen those VP of innovation and projects.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's the brand new VP they don't know what to do with, and they just kind of put them there. I've noticed that before. It's like, but they don't really have any street cred enough to move anything, and not the operational jobs are. There's nothing wrong with that job.
Oh, I'd love it someday.
Yeah,
yeah. Actually, I mean, there's a point in my career that I'm pretty much at now where I actually aspire to that role, but definitely not where you want to be. Definitely not where you want to be starting out.
You don't want your sales quota depend on that title. I think you nailed it, Peter. They don't necessarily have the credibility to affect change within the organization, right? If you're the CRO or VP, COO, or VP of Ops, some of these people that actually have to do the operational stuff.
Your job's on the line for the outcomes.
Yeah, I don't have time for this other cockamamie idea.
And and stuff changes, right? And this is the thing, like, Peter and I live in the world of earlier stage companies that are hitting like growth, going into higher growth stage and things like that. And what is your problem one day, right? Maybe you've solved product market fit early on.
You think you did. Well, you did, right?
Right.
To Ron's point, you did. You got your first step.
That's right. Or because what you really did was you stumbled into your early innovators.
Yes.
Right. And suddenly, to your point, you're starting to hit scale. You've run out of early innovators. Now you need to go more broader market stuff. It's like the, Crossing the Chasm, the Jeffrey Moore book, right? You start to go into that more kind of middle of the bubble, and everything changes again. And even product market fit isn't even there anymore, right? And trying to figure this stuff out, I look at it from an investor lens, and it makes me want to rip my hair out, right? Like, because you have no idea what's happening. You just know a company that had traction has no traction anymore. And Peter, you and I live this. We won't say the name of the company, but I mean, we had a mutual company growing way north of 100% a year. Things really, and it stopped. I mean, the growth
like
stopped.
literally stopped.
Right.
Whoa.
Yeah.
And we were never, we were never
it
able to
slowly
figure it
went
out.
to we couldn't close a deal. Like it just
Right.
slowly in like 2 or 3 quarters, all of a sudden it's like nothing could close. But
Right.
this is really interesting what you're saying. This is a thing that we see, and I also work with a lot of private equity firms that buy companies that were in that first cycle, like maybe get to 10 million. Awesome new technology. The people that get it really get it. And they are changing how they do business with this. But transferring that from 10 million to that next step is that big group of people, and they don't relate with him. They don't even know how to talk to him. They're really lost. And I've seen that, and we get called in a lot of times when they've cycled through 2 cycles of sales and marketing teams, and they're like, hey, maybe you can help. And we're like, oh, well, something's broken. Like, why is this broken? But you go in and you see that they're on this plateau of like, it's not good. But getting there was like, it looked great, to your point. I think this is a huge thing that
Well, that's the beauty. If I could just pile onto that thought, seen it happen. That's the beauty of just ask. By having these conversations, it's not just about the decision point about did you buy or not. Because remember, just ask. You can apply that throughout the market, former customer journey. All of those are fair game for this approach.
the whole relationship, right? The whole relationship. Yes.
And when you get them on the phone, once you establish that level of trust with them, that they're in a safe space to talk, you can talk to them about what's on your mind these days. What are the things keeping you up at night? Not to be quite that cheesy about it, but I think, Greg, your customers early on clued into what was happening in advance. And I think, was it the real estate recession way back when we hit this? Mm-hmm. Like you guys were like the canary in the coal mine. Yep. You were talking to customers at the time and knew that things were tightening up rapidly. Mm-hmm. You were our first client back then that kind of tightened up on us.
Yep.
So you guys were an example of being in touch with those customers all the time, seeing what's coming over the horizon. Yeah. More recently, we've been able to pry into what they're thinking about AI. Yeah. What do they believe? What do they not believe? What are the things it needs to overcome to be accepted in their customer base? We've had other examples where we've learned that people's implementation of AI was just horrible and actually causing them to lose customers. So there's an example of kind of bleeding edge technology. And where does that fit in the customer base's perspective of reality?
In your customer base, like yours is different than that other company or whatever you're listening to on TV, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. The answers are out there, and they're with your customers or the people you hope to have as customers. And again, all you have to do is ask. And once you get them and establish that level of comfort with them, you can ask them anything. You can inform your content marketing strategy, your product strategy, sales tactics, competitive insights. There's no limit to where you can go with it, but you got to establish that level of trust.
I'll tell you, just as a final thought, we're running right up against time here, but just as a final thought, I'll tell you for any founder that's out there that's actually considering going to process, right? So you're getting ready to go into an M&A process, put yourself on the market. The single best, and I've done this now with Ron at least twice, if not more than that. It may have been more because we've used on both the buy side when we're acquiring companies, the sell side when we're selling businesses. So I've kind of lost track, but because I think we acquired like 12 in a couple of years at one point, so we had to go all the time. But
I remember that.
But if you're thinking about going on the market and you're going to start a sales process, have somebody like Thirdside, use somebody else, but do this process to yourself. Take your top 10, your top 15 customers, figure out where your customer concentration lies, right? Take the top 50% of your revenue or 25%, depending on the business, and run this process on yourself. Have somebody talking to every single one of these customers. And I say that because in a couple situations that we've had, we went by running this process on ourselves as if, because you go into a sales process, you get down the path, somebody's doing due diligence on you. They're doing these customer calls. There was enormous power in doing this third-party research on ourselves, putting it in our own data room and saying, we have actually used a third party. Here are all the interviews. Nothing has been redacted. Every single one of them is here. Here are our top 10 customers, or here's 25% of our revenue or something like that. And we actually uncovered a couple situations. And I remember going through this where all of a sudden we were thinking this renewal was super secure. No, there's no issue. And all of a sudden, Ron and his team got on that because we were doing this. We did this diligence on ourselves and found out there was actually customer risk where we didn't even know it was. So we were able to go back and fix the problem before we even got to market. Find out the problems yourself on your own company. Find them out before you let, an investor like me or somebody else like come in and start to do diligence, because it's going to get uncovered. Find out before you get into it.
Absolutely. You touched on one other area that I think is critical for companies, and that's the pre-renewal customers.
Yeah.
Whatever the term is, make sure you also are considering having those conversations with them long enough in advance you can repair any weaknesses in the relationship. So the renewal's going to happen, as opposed to, gee, I hope they renew.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Look, it's all about information, right? It's all about just staying ahead of, and again, I think you summarized it the best you possibly could 2 seconds into this interview, which was just ask, right? Like, I think Peter, if you remember Jason Ferrara, who Ron, you actually remember probably Jason, CMO from Outreach. Yeah. We had Jason Ferrara on, and Jason said, like, talking about this exact same thing, and said, like, it's just amazing how complicated we make it when if you just pick up your customer and say, hey, what do you think my messaging should be?
Yeah. Even new product, we're talking about new product or marketing. Right. Yeah. You name it. Like, yeah, I don't care about that feature, but I really care about this.
Yeah. It's enormously powerful. So Ron, this is awesome. I couldn't be a bigger fan of yours. I couldn't be a bigger fan of Thirdside. But I think, anybody who's listening to this, if you're looking at going down that path, and you really have to get these win-loss reviews in there, get to real customer data, ask the customers, get this back, use Thirdside, use somebody else. I certainly, highly recommend Thirdside. Start doing it. And if you're small and if you don't have the budget, start doing it yourself. But just collect the data. So Ron, awesome. If somebody wants information, if they want to connect with you, find out about Thirdside, how do they do it?
You can find me on LinkedIn or thirdside.com.
Easy enough. All right.
Easy.
This was awesome. Love to have you back on at some point. This was a lot of fun. As you can tell, it's an area that Peter and I are both super passionate about. So we could have easily done a 3-hour sort of Joe Rogan length version of this, but this was great. See you next time on the Founders Journey podcast.
Thanks, guys.